one of the things out there that is of particular concern right now, the jobs numbers. Remember last Friday we saw, the unemployment number dropped to 6.6%. That's great. Last Thursday, actually. And then we said, but we added 113,000 jobs to the economy, which is well under what they were expecting. I think they're expecting like 180,000, and those numbers have been going down recently. And then we hear about all the people who are out of work, and they're not really working right now. And they've stopped looking. So where do all these fit together? Well, we thought we'd, and what are some of the other numbers inside those numbers that we need to be aware of? Well, Derryck Green is with Project 21 Black Leadership Network. Is talking a little bit this morning about economic indicators, including labor force participation, black unemployment, and job creation. And he joins us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Derryck, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Derryck, when you look at those numbers on Friday, again, I look and I say, okay, we've created 113,000 jobs. Not exactly wowing. And then we have a 6.6% unemployment rate. It actually dropped a little bit. And we all sit there and go, how should we feel about this right now? Your thoughts about all that, and take us inside some of those numbers from your particular perspective.
Well, I think what we've seen over the last couple of months with the declining of the unemployment rate, ideally it would be cause for celebration. But the fact is that we're not creating enough jobs to solve or to give enough people who are unemployed work. And so what we're seeing is the drop of unemployment is merely people who are leaving the workforce because they're discouraged from looking for a job. So it's not necessarily a cause for celebration. It's a continued cause for concern. They created 113,000 jobs, but I read a report that said we need between 150 and 180,000 jobs per month simply to keep up with population growth. If we're getting 113,000, not only are we not keeping up with population growth, we're simply not creating enough jobs for the people who've been out of work for 4, 5, 6, 7 months. So the economy is not going in the right direction. And when you couple those numbers with the numbers of people who are still receiving food stamps from SNAP, the people who are still receiving unemployment, those people who are getting disability, these type of numbers are more accurate indicator of the unhealthy state of the American economy, more so than the declining unemployment rate. So I think it's cause for concern, but from my particular perspective, this is part and parcel of what we've been seeing for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I just simply don't think that the president cares and his administration cares enough to do what's needed to rectify the economy. And in addition to that, it seems to me that we don't have enough politicians in Congress that have the strength of character, the resolve to hold him to account, to press him on this particular issue. From your perspective, what is needed to make the economy better then? Obviously we're a lot of criticism right now, but what do we need to do then? Because obviously you have some thoughts about that as well. I think there's several things we should be doing. I think the president needs to slow down on the implementation of regulations. I think that I read a report that he's a regulation king. He's instituting these regulations that puts a hamper on small businesses and large businesses. I think we should also lower the corporate tax rate. I think that might spur some sort of investment in businesses themselves to expand and hire and develop employees to give them the necessary work. And I also think, I don't think this is a reality, but I think that what we've seen over the last several years is the effects of the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. I think that businesses started when they realized that they were going to be mandated to cover their employees. They started making proactive moves to circumvent that. I think that in and of itself, even though we haven't seen the full results, we can't project fully how that's going to affect the economy because it hasn't been implemented yet. In terms of the employer mandate, I think that that's hampering businesses as well. So if we can't fully rescind that law, which I don't think that we can, there has to be some sort of necessary fixes so we don't have the type of perverse incentive that businesses don't want to hire people because it could put some of them out of business. For the second month in a row, job creation fell far below expectations. As you mentioned a moment ago, Derryck, 113,000 jobs created in January. Now, there's a number out there. There's 6 different numbers, I believe, on the unemployment scale. They choose, I believe, U3, if memory serves. But there's a U6 total unemployment rate out there that includes the underemployed and the despondent who have quit looking together, which seems like it's a much longer and wider picture. That number is at 12.7% right now.
And the very low labor force participation rate is 63%. Not a record, but close. 63% of the people in this country. Now, I wanted you to comment on that a little bit, if you will. And also, the 63%, I don't want to mislead people and say, okay, well, we've got a big baby boomer group coming to the end of the finish line here in terms of work. Is that a lot of that because of that, or is it just because people are despondent about it? What's your take on it so far?
Well, it might be a combination of both. I think there are people who get despondent. I mean, after going and filling out resumes and submitting applications, time and time again, and realizing that some jobs, 2 or 3 years ago might have had 40 respondents, now have 400. That competition, has a tendency to wear on people. And if you've been out of work for 4, 5, 6, 7 months, to continually go through that process and not hear any type of positive news back, being called back for second or third interviews and then still not getting that job, I think that wears on the spirit and the psyche of millions and millions of American job workers. So I think that in and of itself, tends to influence people's decision making. I also think that I read a report that if the labor force participation rate was the same now as it was 4 years ago, the U3 unemployment rate would be close to 11%.
Right.
And that means the U6 number is even higher than that,
which is frightening.
It's very frightening. And my concern about this is that not only is it frightening now, but what are we doing to the future of the country if we can't get millions of Americans back into the workforce, not only for themselves to feed their families, but for the strength of America's economic engine? What are we doing to that? And again, I just don't think there's enough attention being paid to that. And it seems to me that we have elected politicians that are only able to focus on one or two things at a time. In election years, it's one thing at a time that's being reelected.
Well, and the point you make is a really good one, because I think politically expedient numbers always look good if you can cherry pick them. So you say, wow, we're going to ignore the 113,000 jobs created. We'll take a look at the 6.6% lowest rate since I've been in office. And you say, all right, that's great if you want to just look at the narrow look and then also disregard the other number over here, which has to be troubling. But you dig down even a little bit further, black men saw their unemployment rate rise from 11.9% to 12.1% during that same period. The rate for black women also rose from 11.5% to 12%. Hispanic unemployment rose from 8.3% to 8.4%.
Right.
So what's going on there?
I think the same patterns that are happening in those respective demographics mirror what's happening nationally. You have a bunch of people who are simply falling out of the workforce. The black unemployment rate is going to be one that's going to go up and down necessarily, as it has since, for quite a long period of time, but since the president has been in office. These are type of numbers where black unemployment, it's only been a handful of times where black unemployment's been under 12%. Normally it's 13, 14%. It's been above 16% twice. Black teens have 38% unemployment. Again, these are people who are not being able to get into the workforce because of the lack of jobs. And when it gets even more competitive, unfortunately, we have in the black community and in parts of the Hispanic community, large numbers of people that don't have the necessary job skills that are going to warrant paying them what the minimum wage is. And so it's even going to be even competitive normally, but then when you have excessive amounts of people who are unemployed, that competition is even greater. And then what does that do? Again, it prevents them from getting into the workforce to develop the skills to ascend the economic ladder. So for all the talk about, income inequality and this type of political campaign type rhetoric, it seems to me that the only inequality that we should really be focusing on is people who have jobs and people who don't have jobs. Let's create more jobs to reduce that inequality, because people are resourceful, and once they get work, they develop the skills necessary. They get promotions, they get raises,
right.
They find other jobs that are going to be more applicable to the new job skills that they've developed.
And into
this is what we need to focus on.
And into that mix marches the black teenagers' rate of joblessness. How about 35 to 38%? Went from a high rate of 35 to 38%. And the president answers by saying, well, we'll raise the minimum wage. Well,
right.
Really? Is that the answer? I mean, where do we start to help people reach maximums, and not just this idea of constantly assuaging them with minimums?
That's a good question. And, again, with the president continually going back to minimum wage, to me it just shows how unserious he is about solving or even contributing to solving this problem. Minimum wage is a very, very small part of the economy. I think 2 or 3% of all jobs in the economy are minimum wage. So to talk about something like that, it sounds good, but it doesn't really have the effect needed to change the economy. Now, what can we do specifically for black teens? Black teens have a double whammy against them, and I would also throw Hispanic teens in there as well.
Okay.
Not only do they suffer from lack of economic opportunity getting into the workforce, developing those skills, as I said earlier, but they're also exposed to substandard education. We haven't done anything meaningful to give the poorest children, which a lot of black children and Hispanic children fall into, access to quality education. We talk about education being a civil right, and on some levels, I would say it is. But those people who are in positions, specifically the president, his administration, particularly Democrats, who are always talking about education, they haven't done anything meaningful to change the quality of education that we're giving to these children. So not only do they have substandard education, now they can't get into the workforce. So now what have we created? We're creating a larger poor class that's going to be dependent on government on some way, shape, or form, or they're just going to make money in underground and black economies.
Right.
And that we don't want that either. So what are we going to do? I think we need to start, doing meaningful education reform so these children can function in society, but then also teach them character education in school, but also allow them access to the workforce. And I think part of that way we do that is we have to let states or let businesses, primarily, ideally businesses, determine what the minimum wage is, because a lot of these minority teenagers, they just don't have the skills to complement with $9 or $10 or $11 an hour.
Well, so, and that's a problem too. The competitiveness then is shot down, and thus we have what we have right now. Rates of men between the ages of 25 and 54 in their prime continues to drop. It's estimated that close to 105 million men aged 25 to 54 don't have work in this country. And for the very reasons you talked about, many can't be competitive because of the educational background. And, of course, then you have to kind of trump up. The government has to step in and trump up the minimum wage. So that becomes kind of the way of getting them involved, even though they may not be able to do even minimum wage work. Let's come back and talk a little bit more about this, Derryck. I want to take a break. Derryck Green with Project 21 Black Leadership Network with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. You're welcome to join, too. 1-800-357-0910. As we talk about what the numbers really mean from last week. And hours work continues to decrease. Is that a problem? We'll ask Derryck when we return. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA, where Derryck Green is my very special guest, a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network. I had some questions kind of come to mind as you were talking, Derryck, and I really appreciate the information you're giving us so far, because I think it's really insightful. But what are we doing to help people become contributing members of society? That was one question I thought of. Should people who go in the opposite direction, who really kind of set up a society in the opposite direction, be fired? And aren't we a society based on work and achievement and being the best? I mean, is there something wrong with that? I mean, over the weekend, I listened to some of these people coming out and say, well, people could have more time now on their hands and they could do more with their families and so forth. I'm thinking, really? That's what's going to happen out of this? I mean, I sat there kind of puzzling, hitting my head over the weekend, wondering if I was hearing a different language. So your thoughts about that and the idea that hours worked continues to decrease, and yet taxes continue to increase. So how do we pay for those?
That's a $64,000 question. I look at what, I've heard some of the same things that you've heard and read some of the same things that you've read, regarding some of the people in the administration or in Congress who were saying that the lack of work is a good thing. To me, it's frightening, but it also points to a cultural shift. I mean, we have 20, 30, 40 years ago, these people would have been laughed off stage, rightly so. But now, for whatever reason, they're not even embarrassed to say that our policies are causing less work and we're happy about it. Whether it's Keith Ellison, Harry Reid, Jay Carney, all these people are saying variants of the same thing. And I think that points to a cultural shift. I don't think we're doing the American worker or the economy, our present or our future, any favors whatsoever by discouraging hard work, by discouraging achievement. I think if people pay attention to what the president has said and done since he's been in the executive office, I think that he's the type of person that discourages work. He says that we want to have people work hard and achieve great things, but what he does contradicts that. We want to have achievement. Why? So we can tax them more and take their money and give it to people who didn't sacrifice, didn't work as hard. Give it to them. That doesn't make much sense. We're rewarding people for not taking those risks. We're not rewarding people for taking those risks and failing, but realizing in their failure how to be successful. We're not rewarding that anymore. It's not a virtue.
Well, what was interesting, you mentioned Keith Ellison, who's a congressman from Minnesota, and he said on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, the loss of work hours due to Obamacare could actually be a good thing because Americans work too much anyway compared to people in other industrialized countries. And then we heard Jay Carney say last week when this whole report came out, he said, opportunity created by affordable quality health insurance allows families in America to make a decision about how they will work or if they will work. Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi applauded the law for freeing people from job lock. Now, I'm thinking about this today, and I think I'm going to go out and stop working because I'm in job lock right now. I don't feel that way, but I guess I am, according to them. And I'm going to go out and stop working right now because the Affordable Health Care Act will save me, and I can enjoy more time with my family. One little problem with that is, geez, I still have some obligations down the line. How do I take care of those? And the dirty little secret in society is there's a group of people out here called the American worker who are still working who have to take care of those for our whole society, especially when I see a farm bill get enacted last week, which has 80% of it in there for what? Food stamps.
That's right.
Big problem.
Huge problem. And again, on Planet Democrat, getting out of job lock, being a free agent is a good thing. And what they're really saying is that we embrace the idea of government dependency. The problem is if you have a contracting workforce, who's going to pay for that? You can't continue to tax the so-called rich because eventually you're going to have to redefine who qualifies as rich to maintain the welfare state. So it's one of those things. But what's even more disconcerting is we don't have, again, conservatives coming out saying this is a foolish idea that they're embracing, that somehow choosing to not work is a good thing. That's a foolish idea. Yeah. If you have the means, if you're in a two-parent family, and one makes enough to where the wife can stay home, that's a different story. But then to go out and say, I'm not going to work because it makes more sense to be on the government dole, that's destructive. And I think that's not only destructive economically, I think that's destructive ethically. And so I think that we need people out there to kind of counter this type of foolishness, to say this is destructive, this is dumb. We shouldn't listen to these people because if you think it out to its logical conclusion, this is what we have. Keith Ellison say that, Americans work too much anyway. I sat there looking at this guy thinking, that's precisely why our economy is so much stronger than all these other people, even in a so-called recovery. Does he not get that? And the answer is I don't think that he does, because his worldview is one of a bigger government dictating to those that it governs how to live life. Well,
and the biggest problem that you have right now, too, is very simple. And this is the most despicable thing about the whole deal. The people out there, be they the Democrat, Republican, left, right, whatever they want to call them, the fact that they are willing to play to, and especially in election years like this year, they're willing to play to the neediest among us and say, we're going to give you more free stuff. We're going to give you more free stuff, instead of saying, hey, we're going to present some ways in which you can go out there and achieve on your own and do better. We're going to give you free stuff. You can stay retired for this year at least, until I get reelected. Is, to me, the most despicable thing out there right now, and that's exactly what's happening. That's what these people are playing to, as opposed to the other one, which is someone comes out and says, hey, I want you to go back to work. I want you to go. You go, oh, really? Why should I vote for you? You want me to do something harder than the easy thing over here, putting my hand out instead of putting my hand on something and making it go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's not a consistent message saying, listen, actually, there is dignity to work.
Thank you.
There is virtue in work. Why? Because there's a notion of self-reliance, to be self-sufficient, to provide for your family members, and to leave them something after you move on. We don't hear that enough. What we hear is, and again, internally, it's easy. We like it. We like to be given things and not have to work hard, because it insulates us from failure. It insulates us from risk. Why go out and do all that when you can get it for free? That's understandable, but the problem is that inherently there's a problem with that. Again, not only economically, but I think ethically, there's a problem with that, because it stifles everything that's good that has made the country great in terms of where we started out in such a short period of time to surpass all other nations that have been around thousands of years. It stifles that. And I think, I get pessimistic at times, but I think that one thing that this Barack Obama's been able to do is to stifle that in such a short period of time. I think it's a culmination of years. But this man has been able to overcome that and say with a straight face, we want you to work hard. We believe in American exceptionalism, after he said he didn't. But then to go and do things that counter that, I think that it's so destructive. And I really, really hope that we can change the culture so we can nurture leaders when they get in positions of power to counter that with coherent messages. So it's just not played on emotional plane and capitalized for political elections.
Derryck, I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, it's been great having you on as a guest this morning. I wish we had about 2 more hours to go because we'd probably figure out the rest of the world's problems. But we'll look forward to doing it again soon. And thanks again for the insights today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Derryck Green, a member of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network, with us here on the Gary Sutton Show.